As players, we don't like tutorials, being held by the hand and be told what to do. We want to explore the game's world, discover its mechanics, be free. But how can we enjoy a game we don't understand? In the end, game tutorials are unavoidable. But are they really? What if we could play a tutorial without knowing it? An invisible tutorial. I'm gonna walk you through a small game I made for a game jam 3 years ago that I feel did a really good job at slowly introducing the mechanics without being a straight up tutorial. I ranked first place in the jam, including first in fun and design, so I must have done something right. Game onboarding is a subject I believe strongly about, so I'll share with you what I did right and wrong in that small puzzle game of mine.
Oh! That was cool.
Hey, so here's the game. First of all, I need to point out that it was the first game that I did the art for, so don't be too harsh on the graphics. I got better with time. This is the very first level of the game. It's a puzzle game where you need to sacrifice vegetables to grow magical glowing golden plants, whatever. So in the very first level, there's actually nothing to do, there's just this thing there, and when you get close to it, you have a contextual prompt telling you to press S to ascend. So it's actually the only thing you can do because it's the goal of the game, so no challenge, no nothing actually. You just need to go there and understand the main mechanic of the game, the main goal of the game. On the second level, you're actually taught that you can have multiple playable characters and that you can have more than one plant to grow. So again, one thing at a time. In the previous level, you only had one, and now you need to know that you can have more than one. Now there's more to it than growing those objective plants. One little trick I did there is to trick the player into an easy solution. And now they realize that it doesn't work, that they need to figure something out. They see a new thing down there, what's that? Oh well, you can actually grow tomato plants to have more tomatoes. And then now I can actually grow both of them. This one doesn't teach you much, but it actually teaches you that the order in which you grow plants matters. Because if you grow this one first, well, you can't do it. So again, it's a little trick to fool the player into just doing everything automatically without thinking about it. So the player need to do it in the proper order this time, instead of just triggering anything that they can. It also teaches the player that they don't actually need to grow every plant, just the golden plants to win. This level teaches you about the sunflowers, but one thing that playtesters actually told me is that they didn't learn in the second level that they could switch characters because it wasn't essential to completing the level. In that one, you actually need to trigger in the proper order, otherwise you're stuck. That's why there's a reminder of the inputs of how to switch vegetables. So you can trigger the bottom one first and learn about the sunflower platforms. This one is the first real challenge level. It does teach about the jump pads. But one thing this level does is actually a little trick I got from Mark Brown, where you actually fool the player into an easy solution, thinking, oh, I already done that. I just need to grow the sunflower and then I'm good to go. And then they realize that they shouldn't have grown that sunflower first. So it's actually tricking the player into failing at least once. You actually make an easy level appear hard because the player failed once and then they feel smart for actually succeeding the second time, because they had a little bit of challenge, so they think they're better. They feel smart for figuring it out, even though it wasn't that hard. They actually figured it out on the second try, but if they actually figured it out on the first try, they would have thought, well, this game is easy, there's no challenge, it's kind of boring. But you actually trick them into failing at least once. They now feel good about themselves for figuring it out. This level is introducing the pressure plate. It's actually a pretty common feature in puzzle platformers, so added a little bit of challenge because I figured if you're playing this, you're probably familiar with the concept of a pressure plate, so that one's really just to introduce it. That's the very first level that is actually only just a challenge. It introduced all the previous mechanics, the sunflower, the pressure plates, the tomato plants. So I'll just skip that level because that one is not really about tutorial. This level is actually to introduce a new type of veggie. There's nothing else to do than grow that plant. If the player goes on the right, they will die because they can't jump over, and so they're kind of forced to interact with that plant and be introduced to the carrot. As we all know, carrots can jump, just like in real life. Some player might not be as smart as us and need to figure out that carrot can jump. When they go next to the pit of spikes, they're told a contextual input to press spacebar to jump. So they can jump over it, and they're asked to jump again just to confirm that they understood that they can jump. This level actually introduced something about the tomatoes that wasn't introduced before, is that tomatoes can sneak in small spaces. Carrots can't go under there, so they need to get some tomatoes to cross over. But if I send the tomato here to trigger that jump pad, then the carrot can go, so you're stuck. So you need to start over and actually use the carrot to grow the sunflower, and then use the tomatoes to go there. So even though the carrots are the new mechanic, we're actually learning something we didn't know about tomatoes at that point. Again, a new mechanic about roots, and still using the trick of fooling the player into an easy solution, so they fail and understand that they can't grow plants with external roots. They actually need to go to the end of the root to grow the plant in question. That one is mostly a challenge, but it still introduces the concept of having a single veggie triggering multiple plants. That was the new mechanic of that level. Again, a new vegetable. To be honest, this game probably could have more levels. So a lot of the levels are actually an introduction to new mechanics. So in this one, you are introduced to the squash. Isn't it cute? But it gets bigger. So the squash actually can be used as a platform for carrots. Otherwise, if you didn't figure out how to use the squash, the carrot couldn't jump over and you wouldn't be able to go through the level. So you actually need to understand how the squash works before you can use them. The squash can also trigger multiple plants at once because it's bigger. And we should have figured it out by now from the previous level where you could trigger multiple plants at once. This one is actually the final level and the final challenge, and I would actually use it as a counter example of something I did wrong. because there's actually 2 new mechanics introduced in that level, on top of challenging the player with a puzzle. Up to that point, there was a good onboarding and good difficulty progression, but this one is where the players usually get stuck because, yeah, there's 2 new mechanics that I will show up. Vegetables can actually be pushed up by sunflowers, and you need to figure that out to go through the level. So that's one new mechanic. But another mechanic that was never introduced to the player, or actually it's not really a new mechanic but a new concept, is to have a vegetable sacrifice itself just to move out of the way. Every other time you would need to do that over a plant. It's really the only time you need to do that. So I actually introduced 2 mechanics in that level, and I think it's actually a problem. I probably should have needed 2 levels before that each of those 2 levels would introduce those mechanics, even if it was easy to figure out, just so that this one is a challenge out of things the player already know, instead of asking the player to both learn 2 new things and figure a challenge with those new things. So that's kind of a problem. And then we trigger those 2 plants. And that was the game. So the rule of thumb is to introduce every little concept of the game on its own, and to never try to teach something to the player at the same time as challenging it. If you want to try my 3 years old game, it's on my itch page. Tell me what you think of the onboarding. What do you think I could have done better in terms of onboarding and difficulty curve? And what are your thoughts on tutorials? I'm also currently working on onboarding for my city builder, so I can put the game in the hands of playtesters. Stick around if you want to see how it goes.